What is it like to do a triathlon? Last weekend, I brought a few cameras out to the Hag Lake Triathlon, which is a race that's just south of Portland, Oregon. The goal was to show new athletes that are considering our sport what they can expect when they race a triathlon. However, even if you're not an experienced triathlete, hopefully this video will provide a few tips and tricks that might make your next race day just a little bit easier. Now, every triathlon race is just a little bit different, and you can typically learn a lot by reading any sort of pre-race instructions that are provided by the race director. But I would start off by aiming to show up for the race at least 1 or 2 hours before your race actually starts. This will give you extra time to set up your bike, see the race environment, and even warm up a little bit before your race. Your race will probably require body marking, which just means that you put your race number, your age, maybe the race that you're doing on your arms and your calves. In a triathlon, you also typically have a race timing chip that goes around your ankle. This timing chip is how the race tracks your time and your place. Make sure it's securely fastened to your ankle, but don't make it so tight that it gets in the way of any sort of movement. There's probably a somewhat specific location that you're supposed to set up your bike. If there isn't, think about how you'll be running up to your bike and taking your bike out of the exit of the transition area, and try to pick the most optimal, the easiest location for you to move forward in the race. And that's probably a location that is as close to that running aisle as possible. Now, you don't need any specific type of bike. You can use a mountain bike, you can use a cruiser bike, a road bike, or you could use a time trial bike like you might see in a lot of triathlons. As long as your bike is in good working condition and it's safe to ride, you're good to go. You'll probably be expected to attach a race number to both the bike and the helmet that you're going to be wearing. Now, a few quick tips about setting up your transition area. I would definitely suggest trying to keep it somewhat organized so you can kind of quickly find what you're looking for. For me, I typically drop a color towel that is easy to see, which makes it easier to find when you're actually running up into the transition area and you're kind of disoriented from the swim. I try to visualize how I'll be finding my bike from both the swim exit and that bike finish. And I go ahead and clip my bike shoes onto my bike. I actually fold my socks, making them just a little bit easier to slip onto my wet feet. And I use a race belt with my race number attached. I unclip the race belt and I put it with my running shoes, just because typically in the United States, you only need to wear your race number for the run section of the race. But you can also pin the race number to a t-shirt and wear that for the bike and the run. I also try to make sure that my helmet is unclipped and near my bike so it's really ready to go. It's possible that your race will have specific race transition bags. I've posted a video on how to pack those for an Ironman race, and I'll link that in the description of this video below. And it is also possible that your triathlon race could have separate locations for your transition from swim to bike. They usually call that the T1, and your transition from bike to run, or the T2 transition. All of that information should be on the website and in that pre-race instructions that you should get. You might also be worried about the swim start, and that's totally natural. Your race might have a mass start with everyone. It might break it up into groups, into like men's and women's, or in the race that I've got here, they broke it up into men's and women's and then different age groups within the men's and women's groups. Or you can actually see some races that will base it on what time you think you're gonna finish your swim. All of those details should also be in the race instructions, but if you're unsure, it doesn't hurt to ask. Now, if you want to avoid too much traffic while swimming, I would actually suggest starting off to the side of the race as opposed to, automatically thinking that you belong in the back of the race. You're still going to see all kinds of different levels of swimmers out there. There's no requirement to do freestyle the entire way, and if you get tired and you need a break, you can stop and tread water, or you can do breaststroke, or any of the other strokes that you feel comfortable with. Now, I would just remember to occasionally look up and make sure you're tracking the next big buoy, and I would suggest swimming right up until your fingertips hit the sand and then pop up and start running towards T1. Now, while you're walking or you're jogging towards T1, you can actually start taking off your wetsuit if you wore one. And as I'm taking off the sleeves of my wetsuit, I actually tuck my swim cap and my goggles into the sleeve itself. It's super easy, it's a fun trick, and the rubbery sleeves keep them locked in there until after the race. And I would suggest stomping off your wetsuit just because those things are actually tricky to get out of. And then just put on whatever you need for your bike. You'll actually be required to clip your helmet on before you leave the transition area, and then look for the bike mount line. And that's where you can actually hop on your bike and start riding. Now, on the bike, you're typically not allowed to draft another competitor, meaning that you'll need to stay about 10 feet back from another cyclist unless you are passing. You know, each race might have a slightly different drafting rules, and there are draft legal races if you want to give one of those a try. In most non-draft legal races, you'll see athletes with aero bars. Those are those kind of like pointy little bars that stick out from the front of their handlebars. They aren't something that you necessarily need, but just for reference, aero bars or really anything that makes you more aerodynamic on the bike will make you faster on the bike. And that's why you see people with pointy helmets and skin-tight clothing in those aero bars. Now, there should also be a dismount line where you're required to hop off your bike and run it back into the transition area and re-rack the bike. If you're switching onto some running shoes from the bike, I'd suggest maybe using some sort of speed laces. It's like $9 and it will speed up your transition. Make sure you have your race number and head off for that final running leg of the triathlon. Now, there's nothing too scary about the run. You can jog it, you can walk it, you can crawl your way through the run, but this is the point in the race where you're likely to see some really worn out athletes. Lastly, make sure you have a good time while you're out there racing, smile for the camera, and just enjoy that finish line medal that you get. And if you think that this video would help, some sort of new triathlete or a friend who might be considering our sport, please consider sharing it or reposting it somewhere where it might help others. Thanks for watching, and we will see you guys on the next one.